Deze podcast is powered by ACC ICT, de nummer 1 Kubernetes specialist van Nederland. En ik klap. Welkom bij een nieuwe aflevering van de Nederlandse Kubernetes Podcast. De podcast over Kubernetes voor iedereen. Ik ben Ronald Kers en ik zit zoals altijd
met Jan Stomphorst.
Even wachten Jan, even wachten. Je hebt er zin in hè?
Ja.
Hey, KubeCon dag 2.
Zeker.
En, we kregen een mooi verzoek van een gast die we gewoon niet konden weigeren, denk ik. Dus,
Nee.
Soms once in a lifetime opportunity to speak to people from abroad. So I would like to introduce firstly Jim Bugwadia. Bugwadia, okay. the founder and CEO of Nirmata. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
We have I'm trying to Shuting Zhao.
Yeah.
Staff engineer at Nirmata.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm clear.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And I would like to start with Jim. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm one of the founders at Nirmata, and we at Nirmata, what we're focused on is Kubernetes governance compliance using policy as code. So as you probably have heard, Kubernetes, everybody complains about Kubernetes being complex. Our mission is to simplify Kubernetes configuration management and make it something that developers, security, operations can all collaborate on, building on top of policy as code.
Okay, cool. And how did you get started in the IT? What was your passion behind that?
Yeah, so my background, I'm a software developer, still pretty active on, mostly on the open source side of things these days.
Mm-hmm.
I try to stay out of some of the product, areas where we have, of course, other very talented team members contributing. So from a background perspective, I started in the telecom space. So this was back in the mid-90s. So worked at Motorola, Bell Labs, Lucent, then, moved to Silicon Valley in San Jose, where I currently reside. Worked in a number of different startups in different domains. And the interesting thing we saw was in our industry, of course, we see the same patterns being repeated in many different ways, right? So back at Motorola, when we used to do distributed computing, it was tandem, nonstop computing. But the idea was, how do you build mission-critical, business-critical applications, keep them running all the time? And of course, today, if we fast forward to our world today, every business is a software business. All of us have, business-critical applications to run. None of us want any downtime, and Kubernetes has become that operating system of the cloud, which makes it all happen, right?
Yeah.
So as we were looking, we started Nirmata, myself, Damien, Ritesh, we're the three co-founders. As we were discussing ideas, this was back in 2012, 2013, we first got introduced to containerization. And immediately, and this was pre-Docker, this was when Solomon Hykes and others were still at .cloud. We had seen initial technology, things that they were building in meetups and in different forums. And immediately we saw that the future of application packaging, distribution, development was going to be container-based. At that time, Kubernetes hadn't even emerged. There were systems like Mesos and, of course, Cloud Foundry and other things.
Yeah, Cloud Foundry.
Yes.
It took me a week to install that. First time.
And 6 VMs, right? That was the minimum, right? It's amazing. Yeah. So those systems were there, and that was typically considered enterprise grade, right? Mm-hmm. So fast forward a few years, and we saw Kubernetes emerge, and we knew around 2017 or so, we saw that Kubernetes as really the way to go, and where that would become the standard. So we went all in on Kubernetes, built some different solutions around it. And what emerged, interestingly, our open source solution, Kyverno, came out of our commercial project. Most companies go the other way. They build open source first. And then build something. We kind of did it the hard way. We built a commercial product first, then took one of our most popular modules and decided to open source it. Initially, much I don't know if you know, but the initial version of Kubernetes was also written in Java. and then converted to Golang. So we also had Kyverno initially was written in Java. We had then converted it to Golang. We donated it to CNCF. And Kyverno now has something like 3.4 billion downloads. Image pulls, very popular project, widely used by platform engineering teams for security operations as well as automation within clusters.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know the Java part.
No.
Oh, no. That's an interesting insight. Nice to know for like the pop quiz, Yeah, we know that it was an evolution of Borg at Google. So that's how far, but I didn't know the Java part. But nice to know. And Shuting, can you please introduce yourself?
Of course. Thanks for having us, first of all. And I'm Shuting. I'm a Kyverno maintainer, one of the first maintainer, I believe, because I studied in New York during my master degree, and then I moved to San Jose and joined Nirmata. That's how I joined Nirmata. And not soon after I joined Nirmata, Jim said, hey, we have a policy engine. We want to build something around it. Are you interested? So I was put on that area to write anything in Go about policies. And then later on, like Jim mentioned, we donated to CNCF, and we're trying to building the project from like sandbox and now incubation. So yeah, I was there and trying to, help anything around Kyverno.
Oh, nice. And how did you get started in the IT?
In the IT, I just studied in the related area back in the university, and I thought it's fun. But I had nothing to do with software engineer or software back at that time. But later on, I get to know about Kubernetes. I think this is really cool. So just wanted to try anything about Kubernetes. And back then, there was a build Kubernetes hard way. Like you have to build each component of Kubernetes control plan and worker plan, and then you just build your cluster on yourself. So I started from there, and then just got to everything of it.
Okay. So, but you also needed to learn Linux probably first, because before you started the Kubernetes part, right? Or this just dropped in the Kubernetes
I just
world?
jumped directly to Kubernetes.
Wow. Impressive.
Right.
Okay, cool.
And doing then the hard way, that's really impressive. What was the biggest hurdle for doing Kubernetes the hard way?
Well, I think that's one of our topic back in Nirmata, right? We're trying to, ask every folks at Nirmata to try that out at least. So we have the binary builds for each component, and you just try bringing them up in different containers. Back then, we don't have that, packaged things. And I think we tried everything on bare metal first without using any cloud provider clusters. So we were trying to maintaining our own on-prem version to run our production products. So I think that's part of the job I was involved in. So
cool. And we had your colleague on already about Kyverno, but could you? You said Kyverno does several things, but could you explain us again what Kyverno does?
Absolutely. Yeah, so maybe before diving into Kyverno, the one question that comes up often is, why does Kubernetes need policies, right? Because Kubernetes is declarative. It has a lot of different powerful things in it. So why policies? Why is that necessary? So if you think about it, Kubernetes is designed to be extensible, and it's designed to address a lot of different broad use cases. But within an organization, within an enterprises, maybe you need like 40%, 60% of all the power of Kubernetes. And if you even look at like something like a deployment, there's parts in the configuration that the operations team cares about. There's some other parts developers care about, maybe like 20 of the 100 lines developers really care about, right? Like to say, what's my image? What's the memory I need? And that's about it. And then there's like maybe another, 50, 60 lines that maybe security cares about. So how do you get all these teams to collaborate on that configuration and manage it at scale? Now, in the large enterprises, you might have hundreds of developers or even thousands in some cases. So policy, just like in an organization, you have a vacation policy and an expense policy and other things. In Kubernetes, policy, of course, needs to be expressed as code. So in some artifact, typically in declarative YAML, which can be managed and shared across all these teams. But everybody needs to agree on what are the right policies you want for your cluster. So having, kind of with that in mind, then if you look at the other aspects of Kubernetes, the question we asked is, how can we make it really easy for Kubernetes administrators to declare, manage, and operate policies at scale? And at that time, there were already solutions like OPA or Open Policy Agent. There was a Gatekeeper plugin. And OPA, interestingly, was initially developed as part of firewall rules back in Nicira. So it's a rule-based, like declarative language. Yep. So that was fitted into Kubernetes, but Kubernetes admins don't know Rego or don't know these type of languages. So the question we asked is, why can't it be simpler? And that was the initial thought and evolution of Kyverno, which became a policy engine for Kubernetes. From the very beginning, though, one other very unique thing about Kyverno, and this is related to our background and experience even in other domains like telecom, Kyverno was never just about validation and compliance and security. It was for automation as well, right? Because in cluster, you can quickly react to different triggers, different things. You can mutate, generate, validate, clean up. So full configuration lifecycle, which is something which Kyverno uniquely does through policy as code.
Kost het beheer van Kubernetes je veel tijd en expertise? Maak kennis met ACC ICT. Zij ontzorgen je volledig met managed Kubernetes diensten op elke cloud. Gecertificeerde specialisten zorgen voor compleet beheer, 24/7 support en optimale beveiliging. Jij kunt je focussen op je core business, terwijl je Kubernetes-omgeving in betrouwbare handen is. Manage Kubernetes van ACC ICT. Jouw zorg, onze expertise. Bezoek accict.com.
And how would you use that then in do you have a specific example, a good example, when you use Kyverno?
Several, right? So the basics have become pod security. So by default, Kubernetes is insecure. If you're running a pod, there is a potential of a container breakout. Runtime security tools can detect this, but it's too late if they've detected it. It's already happened, right? So what do you do? And Kubernetes does allow you to follow secure best practices, but it's up to you and your organization to enforce that. So the very basic use cases we see is like pod security policies, making sure that, each container has a security context. You're not running as root user. You're not allowing privilege escalation, changes in the container, things like that, right? Then like other best practices like configuring resource quotas, resource limits, probes, health checks, which are just basic hygiene for your clusters. Other use cases we see is automatically generating network policies for each namespace, automatically generating VPAs. There was a great blog post from the platform team at Adidas where what they did was they used Kyverno to integrate with VPA Recommender, and they ended up saving about 50% costs in their dev test environments, right, by automatically setting quotas, limits, things like that, for their workloads itself, right? So those sort of use cases, it becomes really a toolbox for security, compliance, automation for platform engineers.
Okay, and when you're setting it up, there are like a certain set of rules. I can imagine when that come with the package. Is the execution of those rules all flexible, or is it just from top down?
Yeah. So yesterday I was talking with one of the Kyverno users, and they asked the same question: is there any way to do policy exceptions granularly? Because we have the option at the policy level for exclusions. We have it for at the webhook level. But what if you want to do it generally, right, across all the policies? So we introduced this sort of concept of policy exceptions so that you can target to specific set of policies, or you can use image filters or any type of conditions. So you can granularly control what can be skipped by all of the configured policies. So that's when we were doing the exceptions for all the exclusions.
Okay, nice.
And if I want to start with Kyverno, what's the best way to start?
There's a Helm chart, takes like 2 minutes to install.
And that's it. Okay, next question.
And then my cluster is closed down?
No. So Kyverno by default doesn't install any policies. Then we have about like 460 sample policies. You can choose. We also have a Helm chart for like pod security. There's other policy sets from Nirmata, which we maintain for extended versions of Kyverno as well as Kubernetes, which you can start with like best practices and other policy sets, right? So the community maintains quite a lot of those, but there's others also which you can start with.
So I install Kyverno on my cluster with Helm.
Yes,
And then I pick a set of policies.
correct.
Yeah, but I
And
assume
that's
it's
it.
like in audit mode.
The default usually is audit mode. And the nice thing about Kyverno policies is because it's declarative, Kubernetes resource, you can use customize, you can use other tools like Helm if you have your policy sets managed through Helm. And you can, flip from audit to enforce as you need, right? So it becomes pretty simple. But starting out, audit is probably the best way to get started. Kyverno has built-in in-cluster reporting. So that's a subsystem we've spent quite a lot of time on. We're, in fact, that reporting standard we've spun out, and the policy working group is, making that a standard across Kubernetes controllers. Because just like you have open telemetry, we're proposing open reporting as another, kind of project, which will allow different scanners, different policy engines to also produce standard reports.
Yeah.
If I hear all the things we're talking about, it also sounds like a little bit like the app locker thing you have on Windows, maybe on Linux. You also have the thing.
The app locker?
The app locker.
Oh, the app locker.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Microsoft built-in Windows solutions. You can like have it in audit mode, see all the executables and DLLs that are triggered in the event log, and you can see, okay, I want to block this one. So you can only allow a certain set of things used on your Windows machine. That's
I don't know Windows, but it's more like secure Linux.
I see Linux, but okay.
And you said, where are my? If I'm doing not enforce mode, where does my login goes? Is that in the pod or where?
It's a separate resource in Kubernetes. So
so
the report is also produced as a resource in Kubernetes, which you can, again, through kubectl, if you're a developer, you see it in your environment. We also produce events, right? So you can see that in the events for the pod, if there's violations, things like that.
And I can send that events and the reports to like an cluster.
Yes. So there is another sub project within Kyverno called Policy Reporter, which also routes events to whether it's Slack or Teams or other endpoints.
Yep.
Because I'm imagining a series of clusters, of course, because normally the companies have an play cluster, OTA, of a
Development,
and you've got a production cluster.
Yes.
And I want the events on my management cluster, and in a beautiful window to click and see something, of course. So I want to ship my events to an Alec or Greylog or something else to get that overview. But that's possible. Yeah. That's awesome. I was going somewhere, but I forgot my way.
Yeah, take your time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I forgot my way. That doesn't matter. But, yeah.
So about Nirmata. Kyverno is one is the open source project, but do you all have other projects besides Kyverno?
So we offer a commercial solution around Kyverno, right? So the approach that we took, so of course, a lot of open source companies, they offer an enterprise version of the open source. But the problem we are trying to solve, and again, within, customers who are like larger enterprises, we see a lot of, usage with financial services, utilities, regulated industries, right? Where, again, it's mission critical, business critical software. So the interesting problem is policy becomes a collaboration tool, right? So you want to generate these violations, but you want developers to see the violations, and you want them to be able to remediate and address this. But no platform engineer wants to go nag the developers and say, "Hey, you must fix this." And
the DevOps discussion, right?
Right, exactly. So, and it's now DevSecOps.
DevSecOps even between, yeah.
So the problem we solve at Nirmata is that collaboration problem, the team problem. Whereas Kyverno becomes that enforcement point for policies. And we've extended Kyverno beyond Kubernetes, so you can apply policies in pipelines, in clusters, and even on your cloud services. But Nirmata offers something called Control Hub, which, like GitHub is to Git, Control Hub is to Kyverno, becomes that collaboration tool for DevSecOps teams for policy management, reporting, centralized reporting, right? With deduplication, aggregation, and also things like exception management, remediation. All of that comes with our commercial software Control Hub.
Okay, nice.
I was back
you're
at
back?
you're back. Now, I was thinking about is there a way that a policy automatically adapts on the environment? So automatically, automatic
but
policies or something.
You're getting somewhere, yeah.
Not AI policies. That's
So one of the things, so Kubernetes is interesting, right? So almost like across organizations, no two Kubernetes installations are exactly the same, because let's say if you're doing service mesh, maybe somebody's running Linkerd, others are running Istio.
and a lot of CRDs around.
Yes, yeah. So like depends on what you install. Some people have Cert Manager, other people have other things. And interestingly, each project like Istio comes with about 60 plus best practice configurations. But who's going to manage those? Who's going to, organize those? So what we're doing at Nirmata is we're able to inspect the cluster and see, okay, what do you have installed, and start recommending policies, right? And if you change things, if you upgrade to a new version of Kubernetes, or if you, upgrade to a new version, like add a new CRD, we can dynamically say, hey, here are, 5 policies you want to install for best practices recommended by that project, right?
Right.
So that type of workflow is something we're doing, and of course, incorporating, LLMs and AI and some of those things into it.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking, maybe it's a stupid question, but does sidecars come into play somewhere within Kyverno, or is that I can see that what sidecars are doing beside the containers, and you want to keep them in place also? Is that nothing to do?
You can write a policy about sidecars.
Yeah.
No sidecars.
No sidecars.
Yeah, we do have a lot of sample policies on sidecars, right?
Yeah, we have a few options to that. Can think of any.
Yeah, it dropped in, and I think
No, so the interesting thing is a pod is not just about, the main containers, right? So there are other ephemeral containers. There's other, kind of sidecars, which init containers. So if you're doing something like one of the use cases for Kyverno is image verification. So if you're managing software images at scale, you really need to make sure that all images are compliant.
No, I think that's a standard thing everybody has to do.
Right.
Verifying your images. I think there's no discussion in there. That's a great option.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best options.
It's everybody should do, but you'd be surprised at how few people are actually doing it in production yet, right? Because it seems complex, but tools like Kyverno can make it very simple and straightforward.
Yeah, because we all know that story that some Bitcoin miner got in a Docker container and runs all your... Right. Yeah. If you talking about rules, if you think about rules, what is the rule that rules them all?
What's the one rule that rules everything?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Yes, a little bit abstract.
Yeah, of course.
Like a meta rule for... I think, again, like starting with the basics, right? So just if you break down Kubernetes, the interesting thing is whether you're running an AI workload or you're running, a VM like with KubeVirt and Kubernetes, or if you're running a microservice which is written for the cloud native world, ultimately all of those are running as pods, right? So that normalization is fantastic because it allows tools like Kyverno to apply policies at that pod level. And one interesting feature which Kyverno has, Shuting was responsible for writing and also managing, is something called auto generation for pod controllers. So it can automatically develop, generate on the fly in the cluster if you write a policy at a pod level for any pod controller, which that policy should apply to as well.
Because if we look at the technical, is Kyverno running in between the controllers, or you're saying yes, and you don't need to have Kyverno running to enforce the rules. So, for example, if the pods of Kyverno are not running, is then my cluster dead?
Possibly. So
Possibly. Oh, yeah.
So it depends on how you've configured Kyverno and some of the workloads. So the default is, to run as an admission controller. Mm-hmm. So every time there's an API request, and, we do fine-grained webhook management. So based on your policy sets, only certain requests will go to Kyverno. In the latest releases, we also now support automatically generating Kubernetes policies. So Kubernetes has built-in validating policies and mutating admission policies. So we can automatically generate those, and those can run directly in the API server. So then in that case, if you then bring down the Kyverno pods, doesn't matter, your policies will still be applied.
Okay.
Right. And I think, Jim, you did a session yesterday with the working group about talking about validating emission policies and mutating emission policies, like those entry solutions in Kubernetes. And some of the strategy or best practice to follow is always use the built-in solutions for basic scenarios. And if you want more, if you want to solve advanced use cases, then work with webhooks, right? So because think about this, if you're verifying your image signatures, we need to pull from the remote registry, right? And that going to adds up to your emission review latency. And definitely you don't want to do that to slow down everything in your cluster. Yeah. So some of the best practices we recommend in Kyverno is that instead of, bring Kyverno directly into your cluster, we have the off-cluster mode. We have the Kyverno CLI for you to plug it into your CI/CD pipeline so you can verify everything before they are actually created into your cluster. So that doesn't add up to the admission process. And also we have this simple enough starting point called Kyverno Playground. So you can try out a single policy with the resource that you want, and then you test the policy and the result. You'll get whatever the result the same as the cluster, as running Kyverno in the cluster. So like back to your question earlier in this session, you're asking what's the best way to get started with Kyverno. Yes, of course, you want to try out Kyverno in cluster, but we have different options, right? We have CLIs and we have Playground. So there's a lot of different things that you can try out just to get started with it without, actually bringing it to your cluster and worrying about, what if my cluster is going down or something. I doesn't want to make Kyverno sound that scary.
Of course not. Yeah. What is the biggest mistake people make if they use Kyverno or make rule sets?
So in the early days of Kyverno, and this was partly our fault too, like in the sample policies, we would just say wildcard star.
Oh, right. There you go.
And then, of course, somebody would put this into a very big cluster, and some of the worst environments tend to be dev test clusters. So now Kyverno is like immediately getting every API request in the cluster, right? And it's not configured to scale. It's not configured for HA, which can cause challenges.
Right.
Yeah.
And another common, I wouldn't call it mistake, but not the best practice configuration is that people think the open source out-of-box Helm charts can run anywhere, but that's not true, especially for large clusters, right? We want to make Kyverno by default the lightweight. So we don't want to, require much resource allocations on Kyverno, and there's limited access to your cluster. We want to make it secure by default, but it depends on your use case and what are the scales of your cluster. You may want to tune Kyverno differently. And this, Jim just mentioned, Istio has 60 different best practices, configurations, and that's, I think, everybody should keep in mind that we need to twin Kyverno in different production environments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what would the ideal cluster look like security-wise? It's like, even we say, of course, you will say Kyverno, and I understand that, but there are more security solutions people could use and should use to make their clusters the most secure they can get.
Right. Yeah, so Kyverno is not a runtime security tool, right? It focuses on configuration. So the approach is to get more proactive about security versus detect things at runtime, but you still need a runtime security tool, right? So that is something. But ideally, and we've seen this with some of our customers at Nirmata, our best customers, they just block every misconfiguration up front. So they have very clean,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so their reports are very clean. Their compliance is also very good. And they're, like Shuting was mentioning, they enforce policies in their pipelines. They take care of that outside the cluster. So when it comes to admission control, that's just the last line of defense, right?
Yeah, the shift left approach more.
Exactly.
Like, right? Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things within CNCF, and we didn't come up with this term, somebody at Google did, they recommend shift down security instead of shift left. Because if you think about it, if you shift left, every app team now has to learn security, right? And that doesn't scale in a large organization. If you shift down, you're saying, hey, platform team, you take on security, and that has value for all of your application teams at once, right?
Right. Yeah.
So moving security into the platform, which of course gets built on top of Kubernetes, makes a lot of sense and brings a lot of value to these organizations.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are we up for the final question, Jan?
Final question.
Go ahead.
If you see the future of Kubernetes or and Kyverno, what should it be?
Or what can we expect?
What can it be? Yeah, what do you expect? What should it be, eh?
And it's a question for both of you,
Yeah.
right? So,
Shuting, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of AI-related topics recently emerging in Kubernetes area. And, we're also building the AI related to about Kyverno, because we heard of a lot of use cases like, hey, I don't want to build the policy from scratch, or if I'm migrating from other policy engines to Kyverno, I don't want to learn the syntax or how to do the context lookup. Then, I think there might be an AI tool to help that. Okay, what if I don't want to run as root? Just simple as that, and give me the policy. I just need that, right? So we have a lot of simple policies in our pool. So I think we can leverage the AI trends to integrate that in our policy engine, so that we can come up with the policy out of box without requiring user to do that. So we can kind of offload the work from the user side. So that's the one thing that at least I'm interested in most. about Kubernetes in the future with AI and policy.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. We feel there's a lot of potential for AI to really bring superpowers to platform engineering, right? So that's a very interesting area in general. We also believe, of course, that policy as code, much like infrastructure as code, if you think about 10 years ago, every tool, every management tool had its own provisioning system. But then Terraform happened, right? And Terraform it was the kind of light bulb moment for infrastructure as code, where then everybody said, okay, this should become a common building block.
Yeah.
So if you think about what exactly is a platform, we think of it as IAC plus PAC or policy as code plus GitOps gives you a basic platform, right?
Yeah.
So we think the time for policy as code to be extracted out of every one of these solutions, have a universal policy language which we can use, and obviously we think Kyverno should be,
of course,
is one of the best choices for that. But that's super exciting to us and what we see happening in the future.
Cool.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much for joining us here at KubeCon 25. And I'd love to follow up this conversation in the future and see what Kyverno, the state of Kyverno at that point. So again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Deze podcast is een initiatief van ACC ICT en wij zijn te beluisteren op onze website k8spodcast.nl via Spotify, Apple en alle andere favoriete podcastproviders.